It's just a ramshackle little room in New Orleans' French Quarter. Stained walls, paint peeling, people crouched on old benches or huddled in back close enough to feel air puffing from the horns on stage. This is the joint Charlie Musselwhite called the Holy Grail of clubs, that Tom Waits called sacred holy ground, and those old stained walls like 9 Picassos. This is where Louis Armstrong said you'll find all the greats? Well, yeah. This is Preservation Hall, founded in 1961, the beating heart of a jazz juggernaut spreading New Orleans musical traditions to generation after generation. Preservation Hall today is a community of tradition bearers, says Foundation Director Greg Lucas. The mission is crystallized around this idea of not just preserving, but perpetuating the culture with a continuum of services from cradle to grave. It does that in multiple ways: education and community engagement, hosting over 10,000 students a year at the Hall and over 150 classroom visits with its Kids in the Hall program. The Unlocking Potential program reaches hundreds in youth detention centers. Then there's the Legacy and Archives programs, honoring the past by providing stipends and services to old musicians and documenting the remarkable history of the Hall. That's in addition to 400 performances a year in the Hall by a collective of 100 musicians rotating nightly and presenting free community concerts throughout New Orleans. Then there's the touring Preservation Hall Band, a thrilling fusion of New Orleans traditions, world beat, and contemporary grooves, led by Ben Jaffe, son of the Hall's first directors. It began as a honeymoon. Newlyweds Alan and Sandra Jaffe visited New Orleans in 1960 and joined a second-line parade on its way to 726 St. Peter Street, where Larry Borenstein's art gallery hosted traditional jazz jams featuring pioneers from the birth of jazz who'd blown with Buddy Bolden, King Oliver, and Jelly Roll Morton. With the rise of modern jazz, R&B, and rock, those old-timers had no place to play, but the jams became instantly popular. People were entranced by the living sounds of jazz's origins, from legends like Punch Miller, George Lewis, Billy and Dee Dee Pierce, the Humphrey Brothers, and the irresistible Sweet Emma Barrett, wearing her trademark garter with bells.
I ain't gonna give you none.
The Jaffes moved to New Orleans a year later, just as Borenstein moved his gallery next door so the Hall could become a full-time venue. The couple became directors of the newly named Preservation Hall. They smartly decided not to remodel the old room, that the Hall's mission fit with what Vanity Fair called its state of noble decadence. They began to search out other pioneers, many needing health care and new instruments. In 1963, Alan formed a permanent Preservation Hall touring band, playing tuba and bass as his son does today. It became a national sensation, spurring a traditional jazz revival. Louisiana was in the Jim Crow South, but the Jaffes from Philadelphia could not imagine presenting this music in a segregated setting. They were occasionally arrested for violating anti-social gathering laws, but never obeyed them. When Sandra Jaffe heard the racist slogan, "We don't mix our coffee and our cream," she'd replied that the most popular coffee drink in New Orleans was Café au lait. My mom could, when needed, add gas to fires, Ben says proudly.
Yes, I sing.
It soon became impossible to imagine New Orleans without Preservation Hall, but as the last of those pioneers died, some suggested its work was finished. Ben Jaffe, who assumed his parents' role after graduating from Oberlin in 1992, believed the Hall's mission was to preserve and perpetuate New Orleans traditions. It was time for Phase 2, keeping those traditions a living part of modern culture.
Of course, what we have seen is a lot of flooding all over the city.
In its own tragic way, Hurricane Katrina helped. With the hall temporarily closed, more for lack of tourists than storm damage, Ben put more focus on the touring band, forging high-profile collaborations with Beck, My Morning Jacket, Angelique Kidjo, Elvis Costello, Lenny Kravitz, Alabama Shakes, Arcade Fire, and others. Nobody wanted to imagine New Orleans without Preservation Hall. The foundation stepped up its educational and outreach projects, offering more work for the music's elders, more contact with young people. It's a pleasure for me to hand it down, says pianist Ricky Money, just as it was handed down to me. Now I'm the old man teaching the younger people. The band made groundbreaking trips to Haiti and Cuba, showcased in the award-winning film A Tuba to Cuba. Foundation Director Lucas thinks Preservation Hall is a model for preserving other cultural traditions, describing it as a three-legged stool, each leg strengthening the other. There's a destination venue, he says, an internationally touring band, and a philanthropic, civic-oriented foundation. It's a virtuous structure, all creating that continuum where the next generation carries the torch received by the older generation from their elders. This place just gives, Jim James of My Morning Jacket says. It gives and gives and gives.